Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Have you ever wondered if the earth can bleed? Is there a fire somewhere that never goes out? Why are there strange glowing orbs dancing in the middle of nowhere? Today's video is all about mysterious places you never knew existed. Until now. The Longyu Caves. The Longyu Caves in China have been dubbed the ninth wonder of the ancient world. They are a mystery that has left experts scratching their heads for decades. These caves are a collection of 24 hand-carved grottos dating back at least 2,000 years. But here's the thing. No one knows who built them, how they were constructed, or why they even exist. It's like someone left behind a massive underground puzzle and forgot to include the instructions. In 1992, a curious local villager decided to drain a few ponds that were believed to be bottomless. In doing so, he uncovered the first of the Longyu Caves. Fast forward to today, and we now know that these caves cover an enormous area of about 30,000 square meters. To put that in perspective, they are roughly the size of 4 soccer fields. Each cave plunges about 100 feet deep, featuring rooms, bridges, gutters, and even stone pools. But that's not even the weird part. It's the fact that nobody has a clue how these caves were made. Let's take a step back for a moment and think about the construction challenge here. The caves were carved into solid siltstone. Scientists estimate that nearly 35 million cubic feet of rock would have been removed during the excavation. That's like removing the volume of 400 Olympic-sized swimming pools without modern machinery. Experts have crunched the numbers and figure it would have taken 1,000 people working day and night for 6 years to finish the job. But wait, it gets even crazier. There is no record of this monumental project in any historical documents. Imagine if you built a massive underground lair and then didn't even bother to brag about it. If that's not strange enough, every inch of the cave walls, ceilings, and pillars is covered in uniform chisel marks, parallel lines running everywhere. Why did they go to all that trouble? Were they trying to make it pretty, or did the patterns mean something? Nobody knows for sure, but it's a whole lot of effort just for decoration. Another big question is, where did all the rock go? Almost 35 million cubic feet of stone disappeared, and yet no one has found any sign of where it ended up. It's like the world's greatest disappearing act. On top of that, the caves have survived for over 2,000 years without collapsing, even though the walls are as thin as 20 inches in some places. They have withstood floods, wars, and time itself. Seriously, what kind of secret construction techniques were they using back then? And here's a fun thought. How do they work in the dark? Some parts of the caves are so deep that no light could reach them, but these areas are just as perfectly carved as the rest. They must have used lamps, right? But no tools or equipment have ever been found. The caves themselves are oddly placed. All 24 are crammed into just 0.4 square miles, or about 1 square kilometer, yet none of them are connected. It's as if they wanted to build a massive underground labyrinth, but forgot to link the rooms. Speaking of architecture, the precision is next level. The walls between caves are perfectly parallel, and the design is so symmetrical that even modern experts can't figure out how they pulled it off without advanced measuring tools. So, how did they manage this? Was it advanced technology or just superhuman skill? I'll let you be the judge. But wait, we haven't even gotten to the biggest mystery of all. Why were the Longyu Caves built in the first place? Some believe they were meant to be tombs, but no bodies or burial objects have been found. Others think they were storage spaces or even secret hideouts for an emperor's army, but there is no sign that anyone ever lived or worked in these caves. Maybe they were mines for valuable minerals? But again, no mining tools or equipment have turned up. Without answers, the Longyu Caves remain one of the most perplexing discoveries in history. Despite decades of research, scientists still can't crack the code. Were these caves the product of some forgotten ancient genius, or something even more mysterious? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Egypt's Lost Golden City. The discovery of a lost golden city may help to unravel an Egyptian mystery that's been around for millennia. 3,400 years ago, Egypt's capital city of Thebes The bustling hub of an ancient civilization was suddenly abandoned thanks to Pharaoh Akhenaten. He decided to ditch everything: the capital, the gods, and even his own name. This would be as if a modern-day ruler decided to leave behind their entire country, start a new one from scratch, and declare that pizza is the only food that matters. But in Akhenaten's case, pizza was the sun god Aten, and that's where the trouble started. So what happened to the original capital, Thebes? And why did Akhenaten turn his back on it? Recently, archaeologists uncovered some incredible clues when they found a 3,400-year-old lost golden city in Luxor, which may help us understand the mystery. The city, discovered in 2020, is from the time of Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III, who ruled Egypt during a period of extreme wealth, luxury, and power. Amenhotep basically lived like a rock star. He had palaces, feasts, and all the gold you can imagine. Amenhotep III reigned from 1386 to 1353 BC, and toward the end of his life, his son, Akhenaten, co-ruled with him for a bit. But things got weird after Amenhotep's death. Akhenaten decided to throw out centuries of tradition. Instead of worshipping the traditional Egyptian gods, he focused on Aten, the sun god. He even changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, which translates to devoted to Aten. But Akhenaten didn't just stop at changing religions. He moved the capital north to a brand new city called Akhetaten, now known as Amarna, and he made Egyptian art go from stiff and formal to detailed and lively. After Akhenaten's death, his son, the famous boy king Tutankhamun, came to power and did the ancient version of delete all on his dad's controversial legacy. Akhetaten was abandoned, the old gods were restored, and even Akhenaten's name was erased from the history books. Well, almost. Thanks to archaeologists, his story came back to life centuries later. But why did Akhenaten abandon Thebes in the first place? That's what archaeologists are trying to figure out with the discovery of the lost Golden City. This city, which was part of Amenhotep III's royal palace complex, was a massive industrial metropolis. So far, archaeologists have only explored a small portion of it, but the preservation is so good that one archaeologist compared it to the ancient Egyptian version of Pompeii. The lost Golden City is packed with everyday items, artifacts that show us what life was like for ancient Egyptians. There are bakeries, kitchens, workshops for metal and glass production, and even a cemetery filled with rock-cut tombs. And the coolest part? Many of the artifacts have hieroglyphs that date back to Amenhotep III's reign, including bricks and vessels stamped with his royal seal. It's like someone left an ancient breadcrumb trail for archaeologists to follow. Some buildings even reference Akhenaten, suggesting that this city was abandoned right around the time he took the throne and moved everything to his new sun-worshipping capital. But here's the catch. Despite these clues, archaeologists still don't know exactly why Akhenaten left the city behind. Was it all about Aten worship, or was there something else driving him to hit the reset button on Egyptian life? Though this lost city may not answer every question about Akhenaten's rebellious reign, it offers a fascinating peek into the world he left behind. And who knows, maybe as more of the city is unearthed, we'll get closer to cracking the mystery of the pharaoh who tried to change everything. And now for a quick break. But first, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Yano Jane G and Rebecca Simmons for supporting this channel. Good morning to you! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about mysterious places. The town of Marfa. In the dusty, quiet town of Marfa, Texas, a strange phenomenon has baffled people for over 135 years. Known as the Marfa Lights, these mysterious glowing orbs appear in the desert near Marfa, making the town famous for something it can't quite explain. The lights are described as glowing, basketball-sized orbs that dance in the night sky. Sometimes they're white, sometimes they're red, blue, or yellow. They can flicker, float, and split into two, doing a light show that would put even the best special effects team to shame. The first sighting was in 1883, when a cowboy named Robert Reed Ellison was herding cattle through the flat desert. He spotted some flickering lights in the distance and assumed they were Apache campfires. When the locals went to investigate, they found nothing. No campfires, no ashes, no footprints, nothing that could explain the lights. And just like that, the mystery was born. Since then, the lights have been spotted by all sorts of people, from ranchers and World War II pilots to curious tourists hoping to catch a glimpse. The lights have become legendary, with stories ranging from UFOs to wandering ghosts of Spanish explorers. Even James Dean, while filming Giant in Marfa, got hooked on the mystery and supposedly kept a telescope in his hotel room to spy on them. I mean, who wouldn't want to see glowing orbs floating through the desert? One of the reasons the Marfa lights are so fascinating is that they are unpredictable. You can't just show up and say, "Okay, lights, do your thing." They appear on only a dozen or so nights a year, and nobody really knows when or why they decide to make an appearance. People flock to the Marfa Lights viewing area, a specially built platform where you can sit and wait in hopes of witnessing this odd light show. The lights typically show up just after sunset or before sunrise, hovering and dancing in the distance. But again, good luck predicting it. So what are the Marfa Lights? And are they really supernatural? Well, there are plenty of theories. Scientists, of course, have tried to give us boring explanations. Some think the lights are just the headlights of cars driving along a nearby highway, even though these lights have been reported since long before cars were invented. Others believe it's a mirage created by different layers of warm and cool air in the desert called fata morgana. Sounds fancy, but basically it's an optical illusion, like when you see water on the road on a hot day, only here it's lights in the sky. Then there's the idea that methane gas from the ground could be igniting and creating the glowing orbs. Basically the same stuff behind swamp gas. But considering that Marfa is in the middle of a desert, not a swamp, that explanation seems like a bit of a stretch. A retired NASA aerospace engineer named James Bunnell, who grew up in Marfa, became obsessed with figuring out the mystery. He spent 12 years setting up cameras, watching hours of footage, and writing books on the subject. But despite all his efforts, he still didn't crack the case. His best guess? The lights might be caused by underground friction, producing electromagnetic energy. Sounds cool, but again, there's no solid proof. What's undeniable is that the Marfa lights have kept this small town alive. In the 1970s, artist Donald Judd turned Marfa into an avant-garde hotspot. But long before that, people were coming for the lights. Local legend Armando Vasquez made it his mission to keep the town afloat by promoting the lights. He took tourists out to see them and even helped create the annual Marfa Lights Festival, which still draws crowds every September. In the end, maybe it's better if the mystery is never solved. As longtime resident R.A. West once said, "Mysteries make life interesting." So if you are ever in Marfa, take a seat at the viewing area, look up at the sky, and see if the desert has a surprise for you. Ape Canyon. Do you believe in Bigfoot? Picture this. You are deep in the woods at night, inside a cabin with only a flickering lantern. Shadows dance on the walls, and every rustle outside makes your heart race. Suddenly, rocks slam into the walls, and you can hear terrifying howls from creatures lurking in the dark. Sounds like a horror movie, right? Except this isn't a movie. This is the famous Ape Canyon incident from 1924, one of the wildest Bigfoot stories ever told. Listen to this and let me know what you think in the comments below. Ape Canyon, located on the southeastern side of Mount St. Helens in Washington, is famous not just for its steep walls and volcanic landscape, but for the creatures said to lurk there. According to Native American legends, a group of mountain devils, cannibalistic ape-like creatures, lived in the area, preying on travelers who wandered too close. These stories, passed down by the indigenous Cowlitz people, were enough to scare most folks away. But not everyone listened. In 1924, a group of 5 miners, Fred Beck, Gabe Lefever, John Peterson, Marianne Smith, and Smith's son Roy, decided to try their luck in Ape Canyon. They weren't looking for monsters though, they were hunting for gold. They built a small cabin near the canyon's edge and spent weeks working in the area. Everything was going smoothly until one afternoon, when Beck and Smith spotted something bizarre. Standing near the tree line was a tall, hairy creature walking upright like a human, but covered in blackish-brown fur. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall. Naturally, Smith did what any self-respecting prospector would do. He grabbed his rifle and fired. The creature ran into the woods, but that shot seemed to unleash something much worse. That night, as the miners huddled inside their cabin, the real terror began. Rocks pelted the walls, and the entire cabin shook under the force of heavy blows. The miners peered outside through the cracks and saw multiple huge, hairy creatures surrounding the cabin. These weren't just shadows, they were mountain devils, or what we now call Sasquatch. Beck and the others grabbed their rifles and fired back, but the creatures didn't stop. They hurled stones, smashed through the roof, and even tried to break down the door. According to Beck, one of them even managed to stick its arm inside and grab an axe. The miners barely held on until dawn, when the attack suddenly stopped. Terrified, they grabbed their gear and fled down the mountainside. Now you'd think that after a night like that, these miners would be the laughingstock of the town. But their story spread like wildfire. Newspapers covered it, and soon the area became known as Ape Canyon, named after the mysterious ape men that attacked. But what really happened that night? Could these creatures have been actual Sasquatch, or was something else going on? The miners stuck to their story, and some even presented what they called evidence. Giant footprints near the cabin and rocks scattered everywhere. Investigators found the cabin in shambles, and enormous humanoid footprints were all around. But skeptics weren't convinced. Some thought the miners were pulling a hoax to drum up attention. Others suggested it was a prank by local teens or workers who were camped nearby. One of the wildest theories came from Beck himself, who later claimed the creatures weren't just regular Bigfoot, they were interdimensional beings. Not sure how you would prove that, but okay. Over the years, people have tried to debunk the story. Some pointed to campers who confessed to throwing rocks at the cabin as a prank. But what about the huge footprints? And the fact that seasoned outdoorsmen like these miners were genuinely terrified? It's hard to fake that kind of fear. In 2013, researcher Mark Marcel claimed to have found the old cabin site. He discovered mining equipment and artifacts from the time, adding more credibility to the story. Even though no solid proof of Bigfoot has ever been found, the tale of Ape Canyon remains one of the most famous Bigfoot encounters in history. Today, it is illegal to shoot Bigfoot in Washington state, so if you happen across one of these hairy creatures, good luck. Whalebone Alley. Have you ever seen a graveyard of ancient whale bones? If you haven't, do you want to? Well, you can by visiting Idigran Island off the eastern coast of Russia. Whalebone Alley is one of the most mysterious and eerie historical sites on the planet. Here you can see giant whale bones arranged in lines across the landscape. But how in the world did they get there? Discovered in 1976 by Soviet archaeologists, this site is an 1,800-foot-long stretch of land where massive whale skulls and bones stand like ancient monuments. Each bone weighs around 660 pounds, and some are even supported by stones to keep them in place. But why were these bones arranged like this? And what does it all mean? That is where the mystery begins. First of all, Idigran Island is tiny. It's only 8.4 miles long and 3 miles wide, but it packs a big punch when it comes to history. The island, situated just south of the Arctic Circle, is home to the native Yupik people. It's believed that they had something to do with the creation of Whalebone Alley about 600 years ago. Back then, during a time known as the Little Ice Age, things were much colder, and food was harder to come by. So whales became a lifeline for the Yupik, providing not only meat, but materials for tools, clothes, and apparently, giant bone structures. So why would they set up whale bones like this? One theory suggests that Whalebone Alley was a shrine, a place where different factions of the tribe could come together in peace. Tribes were fighting over resources, and Whalebone Alley was like the no-fighting zone where they could gather, share whale meat, and work out their issues. However, it's also possible that the site had a ceremonial purpose. They could have offered sacrifices or held rituals here, though we don't know much about what those might have looked like. But there's another theory that is much less mystical and much more practical. Some believe Whalebone Alley was just a big butcher shop, just a place to store and process whale meat. After all, whale meat was a staple food for the Yupik people, so it makes sense that they need somewhere to keep it. Even today, archaeologists aren't sure what Whalebone Alley was really for, and that's part of what makes it so fascinating. Was it a sacred meeting spot? a giant freezer, or something in between? What do you think? The Lake Michigan Triangle. I know you've heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but what about the Lake Michigan Triangle? As you might expect, it is full of strange disappearances, mysterious lights, and even an underwater Stonehenge. This region is notorious for bizarre stories that seem straight out of a mystery novel. On land, the mystique of Stonehenge is hard to overstate. Below the surface, it is downright perplexing. Let me take you back to 2007, when researchers working at Lake Michigan stumbled upon a circle of giant stones lying beneath Grand Traverse Bay. These stones, which seem to date back to the last ice age, have carvings of prehistoric mastodons, giant elephant-like creatures that roamed the Earth over 10,000 years ago. But how in the world did the stones get there? Some believe that ancient Native Americans arranged them as a calendar or a gathering spot when the lake bed was dry. Others wonder if extraterrestrials had a hand in this aquatic construction. Speaking of aliens, Lake Michigan is a hotspot for UFO sightings. In fact, many people have reported seeing glowing lights dancing above the lake, like some kind of cosmic rave. One of the more famous sightings happened in 1994, when hundreds of people saw strange, fast-moving lights over the lake. Even the police couldn't explain it. Was it aliens or seagulls? Who knows? Now let's talk about some spooky disappearances. The Rosabelle was a ship that was found floating in Lake Michigan in 1921, completely wrecked and no crew in sight. The Coast Guard claimed it wasn't hit by another ship, so what happened to the sailors? Did they just vanish into thin air? And then there's Captain George Donner, who went to his cabin on the freighter O.M. McFarland in 1937 after a long day of navigating icy waters. The door to his cabin was locked from the inside, but when the crew went to wake him up, poof, he was gone, never to be seen again. Sounds like the Triangle didn't just want him to rest, but to disappear altogether. And it's not just ships. Planes have vanished too. In 1950, a Northwest Airlines flight flying from New York to Seattle disappeared over Lake Michigan. The pilot requested to fly lower because of a storm. After that, radio contact was lost, and the plane was never seen again. While some human remains washed up on shore later, the actual plane, it is still missing to this day. Theories range from storms to UFO abductions. No one knows for sure what happened. If that wasn't enough to give you goosebumps, remember that all of this happens in one of the most beloved vacation spots in the country. You could be water skiing or chilling on the beach, completely unaware of the mysteries lurking beneath the waves, or flying above you. But don't worry too much. Most people who visit the lake come away with nothing more than sunburns and sand in their shoes, not mysterious disappearances. But still, if you are ever boating through the Michigan Triangle, maybe keep your eyes peeled for flashing lights or prehistoric monoliths. Eternal Flame Falls. As centuries passed, a flame continued to burn, defying explanation. Some whispered of ancient curses, while others sought solace in its unwavering presence. Wouldn't it be great if you could light a candle that would never go out? You would never have to worry about darkness again. Well, Eternal Flame Falls goes one step further. It's no ordinary waterfall. It's a natural wonder with a fiery twist. Hidden behind a cascading waterfall located in Shale Creek Preserve in New York is a small flame that never seems to go out, creating a magical sight. For a long time, people thought this flame was a mystical or supernatural event. Local legends swirled around it, and everyone had their own wild theories. Before I continue, let me know your theories in the comments. Why do you think this flame never dies? The falls inspire a sense of magic and wonder, especially with all the legends that surround it. Some believe the flame is a divine gift from Native American gods, symbolizing eternal life and hope. Others think it's a portal to another dimension, like some kind of magical gateway. One of the more romantic legends tells the tale of two lovers separated by fate. Their love is said to be represented by the flame, which will continue burning as long as their love endures across time and space. On the other hand, there is also a spooky curse tied to the flame. According to this story, if the flame never goes out, disaster will strike the land. I guess we should be guarding this thing 24/7. Scientists eventually figured out that the flame is caused by natural gas escaping from the ground, mostly methane, that ignites when it reaches the surface. But even with all that science talk, the flame's resilience is what really blows people away. It stays lit through rain, snow, and even heavy winds. The origins of the gas are still being studied, with some researchers suggesting it comes from ancient geological processes deep beneath the Earth. Socotra Island. What do you think is the most bizarre and alien-looking place on the planet? If you said Socotra Island, you'd be right. This place looks like it jumped straight out of someone's imagination. Socotra Island is full of jagged mountains, eerie plateaus, and strange trees you've never seen before. Located in the Indian Ocean, Socotra is home to around 60,000 people, but it's really famous for its unique plants and animals. In fact, a good chunk of its flora and fauna can't be found anywhere else in the world. That's because Socotra has been isolated for millions of years, giving its creatures the freedom to evolve into some truly odd shapes and sizes. So, what makes Socotra so alien? First, let's talk about its plant life. The island is home to 825 plant species. 37% of them are exclusive to Socotra. The most famous is the dragon's blood tree, an umbrella-shaped tree that oozes red sap. That's right, this tree bleeds. The locals have used this red resin in medicines and dyes for centuries. It's called dragon's blood, which is kind of awesome. These trees, some of which are over 300 years old, are what really give the island its alien planet vibe. The animals are no less strange. Socotra boasts 90% unique reptile species, which means the lizards there are unlike any you've ever seen. Birds also flock to Socotra, with 192 species either breeding there or just passing by. Some of these species, like the Socotra warbler and the sunbird, are super rare. Plus, the marine life around it is thriving. There are hundreds of coral species, colorful coastal fish, and even the loggerhead turtle that calls Socotra home. The fairy circles of Namibia. There is something strange going on in the heart of Namibia's Namib Desert. Dotted across the landscape are these mysterious barren circles known as fairy circles. They've puzzled scientists and locals for decades. They are picture perfect, almost like nature's own polka dots. The circles, a stark contrast to the surrounding desert, seem almost artificial, as if someone punched out perfect holes in the landscape. These circles range from a few feet to several feet wide, and no one really knows why they exist. But that's half the fun, don't you think? These odd patches were first mentioned in scientific circles, pun intended, in 1971. But the Himba people of Namibia have their own explanations. According to local legends, these circles were made by supernatural beings, or maybe even the gods themselves. Some say it's the breath of a dragon that poisoned the ground and killed the plants. Scientists, on the other hand, have come up with a few less mythical ideas. The most popular theory for a while was that termites might be to blame. These little guys were thought to create the circles while burrowing underground. Others suggested that toxic plants were involved, releasing chemicals that created the bare patches. But none of these ideas really stuck. Then along came Dr. Norbert Jurgens and his team, armed with science and determination. After studying these fairy circles closely, they came up with a new theory. According to them, the circles are a result of plants battling it out for water in the dry desert. Plants around the edges of the circles suck up all the moisture, leaving the center dry and empty. It's survival of the fittest here. Well, maybe. This is still just a theory. What makes these circles even more fascinating is that they've popped up in other parts of the world too, like Australia. They also stick around for decades, sometimes over 50 years. And while they look barren, these fairy circles actually support a variety of desert creatures, making them mini wildlife havens. Blood falls. Imagine a waterfall that looks like it's spewing blood straight out of a glacier. Sounds pretty creepy, right? But that's exactly what happens at Blood Falls in Antarctica. A stream of crimson water flows out of Taylor Glacier into the icy Lake Bonny. Blood Falls got its name for obvious reasons. It looks like the glacier is gushing blood, but don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. The first person to lay eyes on this strange sight was Thomas Griffith Taylor during the Terra Nova expedition back in 1911. Taylor thought the reddish water came from algae, but as it turns out, he was wrong. It wasn't until years later that scientists figured out what's really going on. The red color actually comes from iron in the water. When this iron hits oxygen as it escapes from the glacier, it oxidizes, kind of like when metal rusts, turning the water into that shocking red color. It's like the glacier has its own built-in rust factory. I know what you're thinking. Where does this bizarre water come from? Blood Falls is not your average meltwater. It's super salty, way saltier than the glacier itself. That means the source of this water is hidden deep within the ice. In 2017, researchers made a big discovery. There is a salty, briny reservoir sitting about 1,300 feet beneath the glacier. Just how long has that water been there is where things get a little fuzzy. Some experts think the reservoir was formed when ancient seawater flooded the area millions of years ago, and then the glacier froze on top of it. But others aren't convinced. Here's where things get even weirder. Despite the freezing cold temperatures, this water doesn't turn into ice. How could that be? Well, it's all about salt. Salt water needs much colder temps to freeze than regular water, so the briny water stays liquid even though everything around it is frozen solid. The scientists who studied this called Taylor Glacier the coldest glacier on Earth, with water still flowing through it. How incredible is that? Then, in 2009, scientists discovered that microorganisms live in this super salty water. That's right, life exists in one of the harshest places on Earth. The McMurdo Dry Valleys, where Blood Falls is located, are one of the driest, coldest places in the world. Basically, it's like the closest thing we have to Mars here on Earth. These tiny microbes have adapted to survive in this extreme environment, which has led some to think, if life can survive here, could it survive on the red planet too? Researchers even found that the salty water might stretch beneath the ground for miles, forming a whole network of underground lakes. This hidden briny ecosystem is like an alien world right beneath the ice. Who knows what other surprises are lurking down there? Microbiologist Jill McCuckey believes that the flow of water from the underground system could be affecting the surrounding environment, like recycling nutrients back into the Southern Ocean. Who knew a glacier could play such an important role in the ecosystem?
Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Malta Catacombs. In July of 2016, Mike Mansholt set out to explore the realm of the dead, and then he vanished. Mike was a tourist from Germany who wanted to see the famous catacombs of Rabat while he was visiting Malta. But Mike was never seen alive again. A week after he disappeared, his remains were discovered under extremely bizarre circumstances. All these years later, we still don't know exactly what happened to him. However, whatever caused his death is almost certainly hidden in the secretive tunnels underneath the island, created by a mysterious culture centuries ago. The catacombs of Rabat are truly incredible. Spread like a maze underneath Malta, it is a tunnel system connecting sanctuaries, prehistoric dwellings, and mysterious temples. The system was carved by human hands starting at least 2,000 years ago. Human remains have been found within the tunnels dating back to medieval times, the Roman period, and even earlier. People have loved this place since the dawn of time. Even stranger, archaeologists have discovered skeletons with elongated skulls, which means a certain group of people that once lived here practiced cranial deformation. Since this site is so ancient, there are plenty of mysteries surrounding the catacombs. Stories talk of giants, cyclops, and missing children. So what happened to Mike? 3 days after Mike was officially declared a missing person, an anonymous tip led the police to the Dingley Cliffs, the highest point in Malta. At 820 feet above sea level, the remains of Mike Mansholt were discovered. It wasn't pretty. He was missing organs, his camera, and his shoes. He appeared to have died from a fall, although he also may have been robbed and killed, poisoned, or he possibly died of dehydration. Authorities never gave any satisfying explanation. Many believe that Mike met his fate when he came across something sinister inside the catacombs, and that by exploring the realm of the dead, he sealed his own fate. Fort Bull. In 1756, French soldiers attacked Fort Bull in Rome, New York, during the French and Indian War, which saw the North American colonies of the British Empire fighting against the forces of France. They cut off the supply lines to Fort Oswego and then ambushed the fortress in the night. The French joined forces with native Haudenosaunee warriors and charged the gate. They broke inside and killed every last person they saw. They then lit one of the powder magazines on fire, causing roughly 600 pounds of pure gunpowder to explode. Brian Grills, battlefield archaeologist, says about 60 people defending the fortress were killed in the explosion. The mysterious thing about Fort Bull is that no one knows where it is. Archaeologists have been trying to find it for decades. We know that the British built a new garrison called Fort Wood Creek in the same area after Fort Bull was destroyed, but researchers can't find its ruins. The reason the attack happened at all was that Fort Bull was a strategic military location. It was located between Albany and Fort Oswego, and it guarded the waterway connecting Albany, New York, to Lake Ontario. What they did recently discover were some battlefield remnants. They found French musket balls and shell fragments from grenades that may have been used in the attack on Fort Bull. But for all their research, scientists still haven't found the ruins of the fabled fort that was burned to the ground by the French. Mystery Palace. A mysterious and magnificent palace was recently discovered by Israeli archaeologists. About 2 miles south from Jerusalem's Old City, researchers came across carved stone structures and forgotten relics. Some of the artifacts appear to have been neatly buried, though nobody is really sure why. The palace was built a very long time ago, around the 8th century BC. That puts it in the biblical era when Jerusalem was a Jewish kingdom, what historians call the First Temple period. Based on the fragments discovered, the building was once extraordinarily grand. It had tall, ornately decorated columns and lavish window frames, and was likely occupied by one of the top members of Jewish society. It may have been a king of Judah or a wealthy nobleman. According to the Israeli Antiquities Authority, whoever lived in the structure had a breathtaking view of the entire city. It would have been one of the nicest houses in all of Jerusalem. The palace met a devastating end in the year 586 BC. That was when the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem, just like it says in the Bible. King Nebuchadnezzar II, king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, laid siege to Jerusalem for 30 months. Then the Babylonians destroyed the city building by building, finally burning down the first temple. The kingdom of Judah was destroyed, and many of its citizens were taken to Babylon as slaves. Whoever it was that enjoyed a life of prosperity in this great palace was likely dead or captive by the time the siege was finished. Lost City of Alexander the Great. An ancient city that may have been founded by Alexander the Great himself was recently discovered in Iraq. It had been hiding under mountains of sand for over 2,000 years. But recently, thanks to new technology, archaeologists were able to use drones to fly over huge patches of the Iraqi countryside looking for ruins. John McInnes from the British Museum said he and his team were able to spot the foundations of several large buildings, including what appears to be a stone press that may have been used in wine production. As of right now, nothing is confirmed, and we have no real name for the city. However, researchers do believe it was built in 331 BC, while Alexander the Great pursued the Persian leader Darius III following the Battle of Gaugamela. During this time, as Alexander conquered region after region, he took over or started new towns that he named after himself. After Persia was defeated, this city became a kind of meeting place between East and West. Excavations have revealed ancient Greek statues, old coins, roof tiles, and other items that will hopefully reveal this city's identity. And now for number 6. But first, I wanted to give a big shout out to Lil M and John Smathers. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like these. The Tennessee Tent Graves. The Tennessee tent graves are a strange thing to see for anyone who doesn't live in the American South. These graves can be found all throughout historical graveyards in Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau. They can also be found in parts of Kentucky, Arkansas, and Alabama. They are called tent graves because rather than a smooth stone slab placed over top of a grave, there were 2 slabs laid against one another to form a triangle, like the top of a tent. But why did Tennessee, of all places, resort to this bizarre way of burying their dead? It started in the 1800s. Slabs of stone would be placed over grave sites because the ground was considered unstable. People were buried in wooden coffins, but then those coffins would decay, and the grave would sink because the soil was too soft. This created a major issue because people walking through graveyards kept falling into pits and getting tangled up with skeletons. It was also unfortunate because it made life a lot easier for grave robbers who so readily pillaged the dead. And so, for decades, the people of Tennessee buried their deceased loved ones in tent graves. And while such a thing hasn't been practiced in decades, the mysterious graves can still be found in rural cemeteries across the state. Yashima Castle. These days, Yashima Castle is in such a poor state that it hardly even looks like a castle anymore. There are no more walls, and the only things remaining of the original structure are its foundation and a piece of its main gate. When it was built in 667 AD by the Yamato dynasty, Yashima Castle was an impenetrable mountain fortress. The castle was built on a mesa to take full advantage of the terrain, with its walls spanning about 3 miles. The Japanese integrated the walls of the castle with the natural walls of the mountain to make it even stronger. Over 1,300 years ago, this place looked like something out of a fairy tale, with tall walls, imposing stone gateways, and vantage points looking down into the lands below. The whole point of the castle in its prime was to defend Japan against invasion. It was built specifically on the coast of the Seto Inland Sea to defend against the Chinese Tang and the Silla Kingdom of Korea. The Royal Tombs of Ur. Between 1922 and 1934, archaeologists excavated the ancient Sumerian city of Ur, located in modern Iraq. Ur was a legendary place, one of the greatest cities of Mesopotamia at the dawn of civilization. Ur was built during the Ubaid period in 3800 BC, almost 6,000 years ago, and it continued to grow and prosper until 500 BC when it was abandoned. The city was part of the development of human civilization for 3,300 years, an unbelievable span of time, and something beyond the scope of what most people can even imagine. They worshipped the Akkadian moon god Nana and built the majestic ziggurat of Ur, arguably the first true wonder of the world. During excavations in the 1920s, excavators found a deep shaft which led to the royal tombs of Ur. In the following years, researchers unveiled 16 royal burials. They found sunken stone chambers with vaulted roofs similar to the tombs in ancient Egypt. Unfortunately, many of them had already been pillaged by grave robbers. Even still, there were a lot of relics to be found. Everything from golden daggers to statues of gold, and musical instruments decorated with golden bullheads. There was so much treasure even the looters never managed to carry it all away. But beyond the treasure was something horrifying. Archaeologists identified the graves of multiple high-status individuals who had likely been kings and queens. Evidence of elaborate funerary rituals involving human sacrifice was found alongside these graves on an unprecedented scale. Within their graves were the death pits, holes in the ground filled with men and women who had been slaughtered and then tossed inside as sacrifice. Researchers believe the victims were killed to be companions for their king or queen in the afterlife, forced to be slaves to their masters, even in death. Old Pitsligo Church. The Old Pitsligo Church was built in Scotland around the year 1630. It can be found in Fraserburgh, and it has most certainly seen better days. The church is missing its roof, its walls look like they're about to fall down, and the gravestones are stained with years of bird excrement. It looks like any one of the hundreds of old churches gradually falling into disrepair across the UK. But the Old Pitsligo Church has one mysterious feature not all churches do. It has a burial vault. The south aisle of the church served as a family burial vault for the Forbes of Pitsligo from between 1636 to 1781. The Forbes personal family castle, known as Pitsligo Castle, stands just a little north of the old church on the outskirts of Rosehardy. You can see the old family crest over the western doorway of the church, and outside the church you can find over 100 tombstones. They date as far back as 1643, with some of the earliest table stone memorials being carved with gruesome symbols of mortality, like an hourglass. One of the biggest gravestones on the property belongs to a man named Alexander Swan, who died in 1678. It's decorated with a ghoulish carving of a skull and crossbones. Chanaf Castle. Historical records show the lords of Ramosk appearing around the 12th century AD in Switzerland. In that same century, they built the oldest part of the Chanaf Castle, a tower looking out at the grand snowy peaks of the Swiss mountains and down into the forested valleys below. In the 13th century, the lords of Ramosk added to the small tower, improving upon the fortification and building a real-life storybook castle in the mountains. Although for them, it wasn't a fairy tale castle. It was an important fortification which allowed their family to control trade and taxes in the region. Having such a great fortress allowed them to control all the peasants within their grasp and steal their money through the tax system. Unfortunately for the Ramosk family, a family dispute ruined their legacy. A disagreement between the two eldest brothers ended with one of them being murdered and the other fleeing the castle. The castle was then handed over to the Match family in 1369. In 1780, the castle was mostly destroyed. Fortifications built in the mountains generally have a short lifespan due to Mother Nature being unruly. It was a landslide that brought the castle to ruins and forced local lords to abandon the property. Lost Persian military base. 2,500 years ago, Persian king Cambyses II attacked Egypt. It was at the height of the Achaemenid Empire, and Egypt was in serious trouble as the Persians flowed across the Nile and invaded. All of these years later, archaeologists believe they have discovered a campsite that was used by the Persians during their invasion of Egypt. It was uncovered in northern Israel and was likely a Persian military base. The structure would have been bustling with soldiers preparing for war. The mighty Achaemenid Empire, or the Persian Empire, was founded by Cyrus the Great around the year 580 BC. He conquered the Medians, the Lydians, and the Neo-Babylonians and expanded his territory. His son, Cambyses II, wanted to continue expanding the empire and destroying enemies, so he gathered a great army and brought them into Palestine. This was where he began to assemble one of the greatest armies the world had ever seen. One of the places they gathered in preparation was this newly discovered military camp. Then, around 520 BC, Cambyses directed his forces down into Egypt. The camp would have remained functional as a kind of depot during the war. The immense army required a huge amount of resources, and so there were supply points all the way from Egypt into Persia, and this was one of them. Thanks for watching! Which of these mysterious ancient places would you love to visit? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!